You don't realize how many lights a man keeps on until the day he walks away and the whole damn floor goes dark. My name's Sam Brenner, and for 23 years, I worked at a company that built itself on three things: big promises, shiny offices, and people like me who made sure the gears kept turning when nobody was watching. I wasn't on the posters. I didn't wear branded hoodies. I didn't clap at all-hands meetings or speak in buzzwords like cross-functional efficiency or data-forward initiatives. But if a server dropped at 2 a.m., if payroll failed to sync, if a new hire couldn't access the network drive and the CTO was too embarrassed to admit they didn't know how their own MFA worked, they called me. Not the new manager. Not the cloud engineer with 2 certifications and no instincts. Me. I didn't complain. That's not my way. I showed up. I stayed late. I fixed things people didn't know were broken. I trained 6 onboarding cohorts, wrote the internal wiki that everyone still used, set up the permission framework that controlled the entire knowledge base. But all of that, apparently, meant nothing. It started small. Little signs. A new director of Ops 32, fresh from a company with ping-pong tables and no actual processes, smiled at me on his first day like I was a relic from another time. "Sam," he said during our first meeting, "we really appreciate your foundational work. But we're moving fast now. Agile. Dynamic. You understand?" I nodded. "Sure, but moving fast's only good if you know where the brakes are." He laughed. Not the kind that means he got the joke. The kind that means he wasn't listening. Then they started inviting me to fewer meetings. Stopped asking for my review on policy changes. The new hires, bright kids with sharp shoes and shorter attention spans, started asking questions I'd answered 5 years ago. When I pointed them to the documentation I wrote, they said, "Oh, I didn't think to check the wiki." Right? Because reading is slow. Then came the performance realignment review. That's what they called it. New HR initiative. Company-wide. Not disciplinary, they said. Just strategic. I sat across from the new director of ops, an HR rep named Jess, and a screen showing red and green bars I'd never seen before. "Sam," Jess said, "we've noticed your project velocity is trending below the departmental median." "Project velocity? You're averaging 1,3 tickets per day." I blinked. "I close the high-priority tickets no one else can touch. The ones that don't show up on Jira because they happen in real time." The director cleared his throat. "We respect your depth, Sam, but the team needs breadth now. Cross-coverage, speed. You've become less aligned with the direction we're taking." That's when I knew. They weren't evaluating me. They were writing me out. A week later, they called me into a room with frosted glass and too many ties. Alton sat there with 2 lawyers and a fake smile. "Ethan, it's not working anymore. We've decided to part ways. This isn't personal." They handed me a release package. $30,000 severance, NDA, walk away clean. One sentence stuck out. Employee agrees not to compete in any way with Neuroflux or develop any similar technology for 5 years. I laughed. Right there in the room. Because that clause meant they were scared. I didn't argue, didn't threaten, didn't raise my voice. I signed the standard release but crossed out the non-compete, handed it back and said, "You want to own my mind." "Not going to happen." Alton looked at me like I was a glitch in his pitch. I walked out carrying nothing. No boxes. No laptop. No goodbyes. They thought they'd erased me. They forgot who wrote the code they printed their press releases on. I packed my things. The mug my daughter gave me. The soldering iron I'd kept in my drawer since '09. A flash drive with nothing on it, just a reminder of the backups I used to run when no one else remembered. My father's old wrench, still tucked in the pencil tray. No one stopped me. No one looked up. As I walked past the ops floor, one of the newer hires glanced up and said, "Hey Sam, do you know who owns the printer config script?" I stopped, smiled. I used to. And I walked out. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I just went home, Saturday on my porch, made coffee, listened to the old radio crackle out some Miles Davis, and let the silence settle. It took exactly 1 business day. 1. I was standing in the hardware aisle of a home improvement store, picking out a drill I'd promised myself for years but never bought, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I ignored it. It rang again. This time I answered, "Sam, this is Olivia from Ops. Something's wrong with the SharePoint access protocols. The roles aren't syncing, and no one can upload their reports." I said nothing. She kept going. It says the documentation references a script called Gritcore, deploy, but we can't find it. Of course they couldn't, because it wasn't in the repo. It was in my head, because I wrote it, and ran it manually. Every week. For 7 years. No one stopped me. No one said, hey, let's make sure Sam's the only one who can handle this. It was just another late-night fix. Another silent task. I sipped my coffee. Sam, good luck, I said, and hung up. The next call came an hour later, then 3 more after lunch. By the end of the day, Jess from HR had emailed me directly. Sam, we'd like to discuss a consulting opportunity. The team is experiencing critical access issues, and it's impacting productivity. Now she cared. Now, I was useful again. But me? I was free. And for the first time in 2 decades, I let the system burn. The first week after I left was strange. I had time to think, to breathe. But more than anything, I had time to watch. And what I saw? It wasn't surprising. It was exactly what I expected. The system was failing. Not all at once. Not in a dramatic crash. But slowly. Methodically. The way something dies when no one is watching. When no one listens to the subtle signs that all is not well. It started with small things. Reports weren't getting processed on time. The team couldn't access the project logs because no one knew how to fix the old scripts I'd maintained. But the one that stung the most? The new team lead, Ryan, spent 3 days trying to deploy a system update I'd written and failed. 3 times. I could hear it in the emails he sent to the team. The urgency. The panic. Is Sam still reachable for an emergency fix? Please let me know if someone can help with the back-end integration. We're hitting dead ends. I had an idea of what was coming next. By the second week, Olivia, the new ops director, emailed me asking for a meeting. I didn't need to read the subject line to know what it was about. She wanted help, but she wouldn't admit it. I agreed to meet her in a coffee shop, the one just a few blocks from the old office. The smell of burnt espresso and overripe croissants made the air thick with familiarity. When she sat down, she didn't make eye contact. Sam, she started, we really appreciate your time. I know things ended. Abruptly, I raised an eyebrow. She wanted to say something more, something nicer, but couldn't bring herself to. I've been looking through some of your old documentation, she continued, flipping through her notebook, and there are gaps we didn't even know were there. I didn't answer. She sighed, finally looking me in the eyes. Can you help? Just for a week? We need you to fix the infrastructure for the new cloud migration. Ryan's team is struggling. We're running into issues we can't fix without your knowledge. I leaned back in my chair. No, Olivia. I'm done. I'm not the solution you need. I'm the one you pushed out because I didn't fit your idea of progress. Her expression faltered. That's not fair. It is fair, I interrupted. You're trying to patch things together without understanding the foundation. You never even asked me about the code. You never listened. She looked down at the table, guilt clear in her eyes. Then she looked back up, almost pleading. Sam, please. I stood up and put my jacket on. Olivia, I'm not here to fix something you broke. You didn't want me before. Now you're paying the price. I walked out of that coffee shop with nothing more than a deep breath. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel victory. I felt relief. I had nothing left to prove. But the next morning, my phone rang. Again, an unknown number. I thought about ignoring it, but I knew. It wasn't over yet. I picked up. Sam? It was Ryan, the new ops manager. We need you. I know you're done with us, but we're failing here. I don't know how to fix this. I could hear the panic in his voice. He wasn't calling for advice. He was calling for a lifeline. This is what they didn't understand. I wasn't their lifeline anymore. I could walk away, and they could watch everything they built crumble. They thought they were better without me, but they needed me to run the machine. And now, the machine was stopping. By the time the 3rd week rolled around, the email came. The team's internal Slack was flooded with messages of frustration. We're down again. Missing a key integration module. Ryan, we need someone who knows the old system. Why can't Sam come in just for a few hours? The subject line in my inbox read, Help urgent operations are critical. I opened it. It was from Olivia again. She didn't try to be polite this time. Sam, we need you. We can't keep this going without you. I didn't respond. Not yet. At that point I had a choice. I could go back. I could fix their mess. I could be the hero. But I wasn't their hero anymore. They were my students. and I had taught them everything they needed. They just forgot to listen. So I wrote a short email to Olivia. I'm not your answer anymore. You fired me once. You let me walk out the door. And now I'm standing on the other side. This is yours to fix, not mine. I hit send. The phone calls stopped after that. The desperation faded, but the real problem was just beginning to dawn on them. Without me, the system started to collapse quietly at first, then all at once. They couldn't log into the admin panels. Their customer data didn't sync. The sales team couldn't access their CRM, and the project managers couldn't access the APIs they needed to close deals. It wasn't just inconvenient. It was a disaster. By the end of the month, the company was facing the kind of crisis that started with small issues and spiraled into something untenable. I watched from the sidelines, knowing I could fix it if I wanted to, but I didn't want to. They had made their choice. Now they could see how wrong they were. That's when I got a message. This time, it was from Jess, the HR rep who had handed me my termination papers. She didn't say much at first. Just, Sam, please. The team, they need you. It was simple, straightforward. And if I was being honest, it hurt more than I expected. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was resigned. I called her back, and I said one thing. I'm done, Jess. They didn't want me before. Now they can fix this on their own. And they did. They had to. And by the time the dust settled, the company that had once called me slow, outdated, and underperforming was now a shell of what it once was. They couldn't function without me. But I didn't care. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had learned something. Sometimes walking away is the only way to see if they'll ever really miss you. And in the end, they didn't just miss me. They were lost without me. The first few days after I left were easy. They had the same rhythm: early mornings, slow afternoons, and the gentle hum of my coffee machine. But after a week, the weight of silence began to creep in. No emails from the team asking for guidance. No urgent requests for troubleshooting. No late-night emergency calls. It wasn't loneliness. It was something else. A gnawing realization that something I had helped create was falling apart. It wasn't just the technical issues. It was the atmosphere. I had spent over a decade helping build systems that were designed to be seamless, invisible to the average user. I wasn't the one who received praise or credit, but I was the one who made sure everything worked. Now, the new hires had taken over. They were young, eager, full of potential, but they didn't have the experience to manage the complexities I had absorbed over the years. It wasn't their fault. They were following instructions from above, trying to make things move faster, make things more agile. And that's where the cracks started to appear. I sat at my desk, staring at the empty inbox. There had been a few messages from old colleagues, asking how I was doing, but nothing from the company. Nothing from the people I had trained and supported for so long. It stung. They had moved on. Without me. The first time I heard about it was when I ran into Paul, an old friend from the data analytics team, at the grocery store. He'd been at the company longer than anyone, a man who used to stand by my side during our late-night troubleshooting sessions. Sam, hey man, I heard the news, he said with a nervous laugh. You all right? Yeah, I replied, feeling the familiar discomfort that came with the question. Just needed some time off. Paul looked over his shoulder and lowered his voice. They're struggling without you, you know? I raised an eyebrow. Struggling? Yeah, the servers are going down faster than they can patch them. Sales pipelines frozen. They're scrambling to fix the client portal and... He paused, glancing around. I don't know if they can keep up without your systems in place. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what he meant. It wasn't just the technical aspects of the company that were falling apart. I could hear the tension in the voices of the people I'd trained, the employees I had spent years mentoring. They were caught between the culture they'd learned from me, a culture of diligence, methodical thinking, and long-term planning, and the new, fast and loose mentality that had taken over the company. In their eyes, I was a ghost, now someone who was gone but not forgotten, someone they didn't know how to replace, but were forced to anyway. I had done the hard work. I had laid the foundation, brick by brick. I had kept the system running when no one else knew how. And now, with all my hard work dismissed, they were trying to rebuild it faster, with new code, with new ideas, with new people. But I knew the truth. A system only functions because it has a foundation. You can't build a skyscraper on shifting sand. Days passed. The calls continued. A few more requests from the old team, asking for help. some for system architecture, others for simple fixes. I ignored them at first, letting them figure it out on their own. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I logged into the old project management system, just to see, and what I saw made my stomach turn. The new hires had put out a patch to the server one I had personally developed and maintained for the last 5 years. They hadn't touched the code. They hadn't even read the documentation I had painstakingly written. Instead, they had rewritten it, in their own image. A faster version. A better version. And the worst part? It didn't even work. The sales team had no way of contacting clients because the messaging system was down. The engineers couldn't update their systems because the permissions layer was broken. The customer support team couldn't log issues because the internal tools they used were completely scrambled. They had taken my work, rewritten it, and pushed it live without even testing it. In their haste to innovate and move faster, they had obliterated the system that held everything together. That night, I sat in front of my computer, staring at the screen in disbelief. I knew what was happening. I could see it clearly now. They were drowning, and it was only a matter of time before they realized they had no idea how to save themselves. A week passed, then another. By the time Ryan called, I already knew what was coming. He didn't ask if I wanted to come back. He didn't even offer a job. Instead, he simply said, "Sam, we've made a mess of things. The client database is corrupted. The deployment scripts don't work anymore. People can't access files. It's a disaster. We don't have the expertise to fix it." I didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, I replied, "What do you want from me?" Ryan hesitated before answering. "I need you to come in and help us clean this up." I sat in silence. I had a choice. I could go in. I could fix their mess. I could walk in and save them. I could take control and make them see how much they needed me, how much they'd always needed me. Or I could let them crash. I didn't give them an answer right away. I needed time. Time to think. Time to remember. And in the silence that followed, I realized something. They hadn't learned anything. They hadn't learned that it's the small details that matter. The things that aren't flashy. The things that aren't exciting. The work that happens when no one is watching. They had thrown me out, and now they were begging for the same hands they had shoved away. But I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt resigned. The next day, I took a walk through the park. The air was crisp. The trees were still green, their leaves catching the last rays of sunlight. And as I walked, I asked myself one question. What do I want to do with this time? I didn't need the money. I didn't need the job. I didn't need the recognition. But I did need something. Purpose. And when I made my decision, it wasn't about saving them. It wasn't about proving I could still do it. It was about showing them. I sat down at my desk that night, logged into the old system one last time, and reverted the changes. I didn't fix everything. I didn't play hero. But I did show them what it felt like to lose the very thing you took for granted. And in the morning, when they came to me for the second time, I had one question for them. How long are you willing to stay broken? It's funny how life works. One day, you're just going about your business, thinking you've figured it all out, and the next, you're forced to question everything, to rebuild, to adapt, to understand that what you thought was a mistake was actually just the first step in a whole new direction. The hardest part after I left wasn't the silence. It wasn't the calls, the emails, or the endless requests for help. It was what I was learning about myself. I didn't want to go back to the corporate world. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I'd done that already. What I needed was to reclaim my life, reclaim my worth. So, I started building again. Slowly, quietly. No grand announcements. No flashy logo. Just my old work habits. Methodical, patient, and with a new sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. I knew I couldn't undo what had happened at the company. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. Not really. But I could use what I had left to do something better. Something that was mine. I took a few phone calls from former colleagues who had left Neuroflux after I did. They hadn't lasted long. They were caught up in the same whirlwind of short-term fixes and constant pressure to perform. They were broken too. And they all asked the same thing. What do we do now, Sam? I had no answer at first. But one day, as I sat with a mug of coffee and a notebook in front of me, it came to me. I could help them. I could help all of us. I didn't want to do it alone. I remembered the faces of the people who had believed in me. People who were still out there, struggling with the same broken systems I had once fixed. People who were stuck under the same illusion that performance metrics and profitability could fix what was truly wrong. So I called them. Sarah, my old operations lead. She was already doing freelance work, fixing back-end infrastructures for smaller startups. She had always been the steady hand when things got chaotic. David, who used to handle the integrations for our biggest clients. He'd moved into consulting, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. Rebecca, one of the most brilliant full-stack developers I'd ever worked with. She was off the radar, doing some side projects, but still passionate about clean, well-documented code. I spoke to each of them individually. They were skeptical at first, of course. Who wouldn't be? After all, we were all trying to pick up the pieces of a failed system, but they listened. And that's how we started. We began by offering solutions for smaller companies. Not the Fortune 500 seconds, not the big players. We didn't have the capital to compete in that space anymore. Instead, we focused on rebuilding what was broken: trust in technology. Our clients weren't looking for shiny dashboards. They weren't looking for buzzwords. They just wanted systems that worked, and that was enough for us. We took on a project for a mid-sized digital marketing agency. They had the usual problems: data silos, overlapping integrations, a CRM that barely functioned. For months, they had been using Band-Aid solutions, making it impossible for their employees to collaborate effectively. We showed them how easy it could be to fix it. We didn't promise anything we couldn't deliver. We didn't take more than they needed, and it worked. 3 months into our first contract, I knew we were onto something. Not because we were making money, not because we had a flashy product, but because we were building again. We were making something people could rely on. It wasn't long before the offers started rolling in. Small businesses, local nonprofits, digital marketing firms, even some fintech startups, they all started hearing about us. Not through advertising, but through word of mouth. We didn't need to be the biggest company. We didn't need to be flashy. We just needed to prove that trust still mattered. And when we built Cortex Core, our new streamlined cloud product that simplified database management and improved processing speed for small and medium businesses, the response was immediate. The beauty of it? We did it without needing anyone's approval. We did it without the burden of fitting in. No more corporate politics. No more lying to clients. Just pure, honest tech. Then came the phone call. It wasn't from any of the clients we had. It wasn't from any of the businesses we had worked with. It was from Jess, the HR rep from my old company. She didn't have to say much. "Sam, I've been with the company for 10 years. We're in trouble." She didn't need to explain. I already knew. Neuroflux was crumbling from the inside out. They can't fix the tech. They can't replace you. I sat still. I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Empathy. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't plotting revenge. I just felt sorry for them. Sorry for the people who couldn't see the cracks until it was too late. Jess continued. "They need you back. If you come back, we can fix this. The board is asking for you. Alton is out. He's failing." I didn't answer immediately. I sat quietly. For years, I had been the one cleaning up messes, fixing problems no one wanted to touch. But this time, the mess wasn't mine to clean. This time, it wasn't my responsibility. It was their turn to fix it. I thanked Jess for the call and hung up. But deep down, I knew something had shifted in me. I didn't need to go back. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to be the one to patch the holes they'd left in their wake. I'd already done that, for too long. And so, I chose the only option I had left. Let them crash. In the days that followed, I focused on building, on expanding, on being exactly who I wanted to be. Sam Brenner, the man who taught them, the man who walked away. And this time, I wasn't going to help them pick up the pieces. Not anymore. When I turned down the offer to come back to Neuroflux, I didn't feel a sense of victory. It wasn't a battle I wanted to fight anymore. It wasn't about getting revenge. It was about creating something that I could stand behind. I'd been so caught up in the game for years that I'd forgotten something crucial. I was more than just the code I wrote. I was more than the systems I built. I had to prove that to myself. The next few months weren't glamorous. They weren't fast. But they were mine. I started by focusing on what I knew best: infrastructure. The back end. The code. The systems that no one sees but everyone relies on. I spent days at a time buried in old notebooks, drawing out diagrams and workflows that I hadn't even realized I'd missed. Systems that worked. The clean, efficient kind of architecture that felt right, not just fast. And I did it all from the ground up. But I wasn't just building for myself. I started reaching out to the people who had been left behind, former colleagues, old clients, people who remembered what it was like to work with someone who cared about the foundation. I called Sarah, my old operations lead. I told her I was starting fresh. She didn't hesitate to join. I called David, the one who used to keep the clients happy. He didn't hesitate either. And I called Rebecca, who had left the company a few months after I did. She was still skeptical at first, but after a few conversations, she agreed to join me. And together, we started Black Star Solutions. No flashy promises, no rounds of funding, just real work. I didn't know exactly where Black Star would go, but I knew one thing. I wasn't doing this for money. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it for purpose. We were small, 5 people in a cramped office, working out of an old converted storage unit. But that's all we needed. Our first client came by word of mouth, a small design agency that needed help organizing their data and revamping their internal systems. Their old system had crashed 3 times in 1 month. I didn't promise them the world. I didn't tell them how much better our solution would be. I just told them the truth. We'll make sure you never have to worry about your infrastructure again. It was simple, but it was honest. The second client was a local nonprofit. They had outgrown their software, and every time they tried to scale, things broke. I built a custom CRM solution that worked with their existing tools, and by the end of the first quarter, they were running smoother than ever. We didn't make millions, but we had something better: trust. And word spread. The hardest part wasn't the tech. It wasn't even the clients. It was the rebuilding of myself. I had spent so many years in the shadows, fighting fires, fixing what others didn't even know was broken. And now, I had to create something that stood on its own, something that didn't need me to be at the center. It wasn't easy. A year into it, we hit our first milestone: profitability. We had a steady stream of clients, not giant corporations, but businesses that needed something simple and reliable. The kind of businesses that had been overlooked by the big players who cared more about scaling fast than actually solving problems. We didn't need to compete. We just needed to deliver. But even as things started to look up, the old world I'd left behind wasn't done yet. I started receiving emails from former colleagues at Neuroflux. At first, it was just a few asking for advice or technical help on the systems I'd built. Then came the more desperate ones. One email, in particular, stood out. It was from Ryan, the new head of operations. He'd been trying to keep the company afloat, but the cracks were spreading too fast. "Sam, I don't know what happened. We've tried everything, but we can't fix it. You were right. We ignored the basics. The systems are broken. Please, can we talk?" I sat with that email for 2 days. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone and fix their mess. I was the expert. I had built the foundation they were now standing on. But then I remembered why I left. They didn't want my help before. They wanted my obedience. So I didn't reply. Instead, I wrote a blog post. Not about them, not about Neuroflux, not about their failures. I wrote about the value of simplicity, about how the best systems are often the simplest ones, about the importance of building things that last, not just things that look good on paper. And I published it. The responses came in fast. People who had worked under the same pressures I had. People who had left their companies because they couldn't stomach the politics. People who had been told they were too slow or outdated. One message stood out. It was from David, a former team lead who had been one of the few people who really understood what I was trying to do. He wrote, "I didn't realize until now that I was doing the same thing you did, trying to make it all work, even when it felt like the rules were changing. I followed you because I knew you wouldn't sacrifice integrity, and I'm glad I did." That night, I sat down at my desk, looking at the response. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need the clients I had helped rebuild. But there was one thing I still needed: myself. I thought about all the work I had done, all the systems I had built and fixed, all the late nights and early mornings, and I realized that in this new venture, I wasn't doing it for the praise. I wasn't doing it to prove I could build something better. I was doing it because I loved it. The company was thriving. We weren't huge, but we were steady. We had our own identity, our own philosophy, and slowly, we were building something that mattered. I didn't need to save Neuroflux. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I just needed to build something that would last. And in that, I had already won. The quiet of the office was different now. Not a bad quiet, but one filled with purpose. The soft clatter of keyboards and the hum of monitors as our small team worked was the only sound that filled the space. And for the first time in years, I found myself smiling at it. We had built something. No, we had created something. Something that mattered. Not because it was big, not because it was flashy, but because it was ours. And that, in itself, was worth everything. The decision to step away from Black Star Solutions had been a slow one. It wasn't that I didn't care. It wasn't that I didn't see potential in what we had built. But I'd come to realize something that had been brewing inside me for months. I didn't need to be the one running the show anymore. I sat down with the team one afternoon, the same way I had before when I had made every major decision for the company. But this time, I wasn't the one leading the conversation. I had asked Rebecca to take the lead. I had asked David to look at our growth strategy. I had asked Sarah to lead our outreach to new clients. They were ready to take on more, ready to carry the weight I had once thought was mine alone to bear. So, what's next for us? Rebecca asked, sitting back in her chair, a slight smile on her face. She had grown so much since the days we worked together at Neuroflux. She had become a leader, and I could see the confidence in her eyes. I think we've already started it, I said, looking around at the faces of the people I had worked beside for so long, people who had become more than just colleagues. They had become partners. Sarah leaned forward, her hands resting on the table. You're stepping down, aren't you? I nodded slowly. I've been thinking about it for a while. I've been at the helm for years, but now it's time for you all to take the reins. The room was quiet for a moment, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. They were processing. They were absorbing. David finally spoke. Sam, you've been the one to keep everything together. You've taught us all what it means to build something with integrity. Are you sure this is what you want? I smiled. I'm sure. You've all been ready for a while now. You've carried me through some of the hardest times. Now it's my turn to let go. There was no fanfare, no huge celebration, just a simple acknowledgement that things were changing. I didn't leave the company completely. I still held a stake in it. I still had a role to play. But it wasn't the role I had played for so long. I wasn't the fixer anymore. I wasn't the person people called when things broke. I had built something that could stand without me, and that was all I needed. A few weeks later, I found myself sitting in the same park bench where I had sat months ago, watching the world go by. The trees were just beginning to change color, and I could feel the crispness of the fall air. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to fix things, trying to prove myself, trying to fit into a system that never truly appreciated me. And now, I felt at peace. The world hadn't stopped moving without me. The company hadn't collapsed. The team hadn't crumbled. They were thriving, and they were thriving without me holding their hands. That's when I realized this was my legacy, not the systems I built, not the code I wrote, but the people I helped become who they were. A few months passed, and I started to get more involved in the local tech community. I gave talks at meetups, not about systems or databases, but about integrity, about building, about being the kind of person who doesn't just take, but gives back. I started mentoring young developers. I helped startups build their first infrastructure, but this time, I wasn't doing it alone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something worthwhile. Then came the call. It wasn't from a former client. It wasn't from an old company. It was from Rebecca. Sam, we've been thinking. We want to take the company to the next level. We need someone to help us with the big picture strategy. We'd like you to come back. I paused. I thought about it. Thought about how far we'd come without me having to step in, without me having to fix things. No, I said, smiling to myself. You've got it. You don't need me anymore. Rebecca's voice was warm. You're right. We don't need you to fix things. We just need you to believe in us. That was it. I knew then that everything I had built, everything I had left behind, had been worth it.